Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about getting started, getting the best results from your product team. My name is Andrea and I am the Customer Experience Manager here at ProdPad, and with me is Liz Love, our Chief Customer Officer. So we're going to get going pretty much just right now. Some quick housekeeping rules though before we get started. This is absolutely being recorded, so don't worry about it if you have to pop out. You can always watch it later. And we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions throughout, just click on the little Q&A box on the Zoom panel and just drop in your questions. With that said, Liz, on to you.
Hi, thanks for that, Andrea. So today's webinar is all about how you can help your product team to be as successful as possible and how you can help to enable that success based on the culture around product across the business. So by creating the right environment, the executive team should be able to maximize the return they get on any investment that they put within the product team, so the people and processes and tools around that. Now, to start this webinar, I'm going to make a really important point, and that is that collaborative product management minimizes risk. And it's really about encouraging a safe product culture in which to minimize that business risk. So as an executive managing teams who are contributing to business success and growth, product management can ensure that all parts of the business pull in the same direction with a view to achieving the best outcomes. It's really about building the right thing. So in this webinar, I'm going to talk you through the way in which product management team can help your business achieve its goals. So today we'll cover the basics of what a product manager is, what they actually do on a day-to-day basis, and we'll talk about how their activities contribute towards the success of the business, and how you can help by working with the product team and by instilling good product practice and good product culture within the business, right from the top of the company downwards. Now, I've worked in product management since about 2006, and I have seen so many different talks, have read countless blogs, had so many different conversations about what is a product manager. It's something that's still very commonly seen now on blogs and discussion forums and so on. What is a product manager? There's lots of blogs out there that describe it in terms of how you would explain it to your family, how you know you are one, because sometimes product managers are product managers without even being called that. And there are explanations of how a product manager is a superhero, how they're the font of all knowledge, how they are the oracle or the product expert. Now that all of that stuff that I've talked about, all of that information that's out there describes what product managers do on a day-to-day basis, but doesn't necessarily explain why they do that. So really what a product manager is there to do is to answer the question, what problem are we solving? So when a product manager looks at the world around them and starts to work with teams to deliver solutions, they're doing all through the lens of problem solving and defining what that problem looks like. Product managers also have to answer the question of how will they know it's solved. So that's sort of they take inputs in, they decide on which problems to solve, but they also have to look at the outcomes and measure those outcomes and see whether the problem that they set out to solve has actually been solved. And that's honestly the root of really what product management is all about. Now, along the way, product is going to work with lots and lots of different people, lots of different stakeholders. And honestly, it's pretty much everybody. You do sit right in the middle of everything. Product works with customers, works with executives, engineering, all of these people that you see on the list here. They work with stakeholders across the business. They work with customers, but also potential customers too, because there's no point building stuff just for your existing market. What you want to do is look out there and find out people who would benefit from your products. And so product managers are speaking to your potential customers as well. Now, the goal of all that conversation is to build up enough knowledge and honestly to constantly refresh that knowledge so that the product manager can understand the company goals, they can understand the market, they understand the industry that they're supporting, and also to understand how the product that they're responsible for solves problems in that market. Also to discover new problems. Things change all the time. That's something that we all kind of feel inherently that happens. Change is the only constant in life. And so really the goal is to constantly move towards better product market fit and maximize the potential value that can be got from the product. That means value in terms of customer value, but also in terms of revenue and value within your own business. Now, in doing all of this, what product really does is talks about customers and users, talk about problems, they talk about outcomes. They are trying to educate the company in a way that allows the company to solve problems and also for the company to deliver those required outcomes. Again, the required outcomes for the user, the buyer, and the company as well. And what the product manager will do is they'll talk about the product in its current form, but they'll also talk about what's planned in the future, and most importantly, why those plans are in place and why those particular changes or features are a priority to the company. Now, the way that product talks about what's coming in the future is through their roadmap. And when we start to talk about the roadmap, it's really important to understand what outputs product is responsible for. So they're responsible for defining what and for defining why. In essence, what that means is that they will work with senior leadership to define a product vision and objectives, and that those product objectives should be aligned with the company vision and objectives. And then they'll define those changes that need to take place to fulfill that vision and meet those objectives. It means that the product manager creates the roadmap, defining initiatives or projects that can be used to prove or disprove hypotheses. Those are the big bets that you make. If we deliver feature A, we'll see an uplift in revenue by percentage B, and so on. And they'll be doing that by working with the product team. When I mean the product team, I mean the wider team, so development, user experience, the test team, all those people who are part of the delivery team in order to run experiments which will help them to align on requirements, and at the end of the day come down to some fairly specific specifications to help us define what features we build. Now, iteration is a big part of what product is responsible for. And really what we're looking to product to do is to define the smallest tests possible to help them move towards the right outcome. And I'll talk in a little while about what those smallest tests look like and how they contribute towards a reduction in risk within the business. So really what I'm saying to you is that if you've got a product manager or if you've got a product team in your business, what that means is that you are working to understand the market you're selling to. It means that you're trying to build the right things in the right way. It means that you will be reducing the cost of learning along the way, and you'll be aligning everybody in the business around what's most important. What it's also going to do is help you to stay competitive, because you'll know whether or not you've solved customer problems, and over time you'll learn more and more about those problems and make sure that you are always the product of choice in your market, because you're hitting that mark and you are solving the problems that your customers have. Now, at this point, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can benefit from product management, maybe as somebody who's not a product person but is working with a product person, or maybe you're managing a product team or you're senior in a business. What we'd like to do at this point, and this is where I'll turn to Andrea, is to run a bit of a poll to see who we've got on the call today, because we would like to understand, you know, if there is a particular set of people who are most interested in working with product and maximizing that relationship. So I think we've got a poll now. You should be able to see something pop up on your screen to ask you what the role is that you've got today. So are you a Chief Product Officer? Are you a Chief Executive Officer? Are you a Chief Technical Officer? Maybe a Head of Product, a VP of Product? Are you actually in a product team as a product manager? Or is there a different role that you've got that maybe you were still attracted to this webinar today? Andrea, I'm looking to you really to let me know if we're starting to get results in from that, or maybe that's something that we can continue to see results in as time goes on?
We are definitely getting some responses.
Fantastic. So I think we'll probably be able to get those responses for a while, but we'll carry on working our way through the webinar. But yeah, if you can answer that question, that would be really good for us to know. So thank you for that. At the end of the day, we're product people ourselves, and so we are always asking questions. So thinking about what your role is and where you are in the business, how can you benefit from working with a product management team? So one of the first things is that you should be able to balance competing priorities. Everybody in a product team or a product company knows that there are lots of inputs, lots of requests, lots of customer feedback, lots of ideas within the business, and it's very difficult to know which one to go to first. Sometimes it might be that you just go for the most recent first, but that's not necessarily the right thing. If you have a product team who's in the middle of everything and who is able to balance all of the stuff that comes in and make decisions, what you're going to be able to do is decide on the best strategy, and product will be able to give you insight into all of those potential options, and based on the data that they have, they will be able to help you make decisions about which way to jump and which is the right thing to do. Now, what you're also going to see is the ability to reduce distractions for your technical team. So I've worked many times with different technical teams, and something that was really important was the ability to align priorities across the business. Again, this goes back to this idea of balancing competing priorities. It's not just different feature requests and different customers, it's the priority of technical over business or vice versa. What we really want to see is we want to see all of the teams pulling in the same direction with reduced distractions, and make sure that we know we're building the right stuff in the right order. We want to see a steady flow of work and a steady flow of progress, with the outcomes being aligned with the business's expectations. So by having a product team who review all of the inputs, create a prioritized and focused backlog, the development team can expect to get a steady flow of work coming into them that they have confidence is aligned around the real needs of the market. And the flow of value to the user is going to be steady too. So there's no big waits between releases while the product lies stale. We've got constant iteration and constant improvement based on the fact that we've got a steady flow of the right work coming into development team and a steady flow of the right features coming out of that product team. Now, what we'd also expect to see if you have a product team that's working to their max is that you'll be able to see what's coming down the pipeline. You'll have increased visibility in what's about to happen. Now, if you're in an executive role, that really helps you to understand if you've got enough resources to be able to cope with the demand. But not just that, it's have you got the right resources? Do you have the right skill set within your team to be able to solve the problems in the right way? So knowing what's coming in the future, knowing the kind of problems that you're likely going to have to solve is going to help you to determine whether you've got the right skill set and the right number of people within your business to really make the most of these opportunities that you're getting from the market. Having that visibility also means that everybody in the team has got a much better understanding of why they're doing the things that they're doing. Now, there's two sides to that. One is that if they understand why, they're more likely to make good decisions around how to actually deliver on these promises and how to deliver the right solutions. But it's also, looking at the flip side, it gives you a better understanding of why things are not being done. So with a myriad of things that could be delivered by the product team, what you really want to understand is which things are being said yes to, which things you're saying no to, and why they're saying no. Because those changes to the product are going to be aligned around key objectives, you'll be able to know that if you're saying no to something, it's for the right reasons, and everybody else in the business will understand why the answer is no, or maybe even not yet. And maybe reduce friction, reduce conflicts within the team, reduce misunderstandings about why something is being done. Now, products are also going to help to make sure that everybody really understands what's going on and everybody's coming along for the ride. And I don't just mean the delivery team, I don't just mean customers, I'm also talking about investors, I'm talking about the board. We're really talking here about alignment. The best way to make progress is for everyone to be excited around the same story, with the same understanding of the potential benefits to both the market and to the business. This shared understanding, again, it will reduce conflict, reduce confrontation, and therefore you're going to increase the likelihood of success. You're going to reduce the element of storming that you can sometimes see in a business where different groups of people have different opinions on which way something should be going, because everybody's coming along for the same ride and everybody's got the same story. Now, you're going to also see a reduction in rework that can result from misunderstanding. So not only is everybody going to be aligned around the same priorities, but we're going to see quicker progress and an increased velocity in solving those customer problems. Now, thinking about, again, the technical stakeholders in the business, I've spoken to many technical stakeholders who like to know that they're building the right thing, and we're talking about alignment there, but also that we're building it in the right way. There's huge value for the technical team if they understand the business priorities and the desired outcomes, so that they can use their ingenuity and their experience to design the best possible solutions. They can really maximize the most up-to-date and most cutting-edge way of solving problems. So by having a clear understanding of the problems and having the requirements defined as problems rather than solutions, the technical team are more likely to come up with innovative and even disruptive solutions that place the business ahead of the competition. So whether you're a startup firm looking to disrupt an established industry, or whether you're a large corporate company, a corporate business who are looking to introduce something like a lab process or you know, a sort of startup kind of thinking within your business, this is definitely the best way to do it and the best way to be able to work as quickly as some of those much more agile startups that we see out there. Now, something else that I've seen working really well with technical teams is having a clear, consistent process in bringing work through to development. So by using the product team's ability to filter the backlog, prioritize it, develop it, and ultimately push a prioritized list of tasks, the development team can once again ensure that they are focusing on building the right things in the right way. Now, I've mentioned risk a couple of times, and again, I just want to highlight the fact that product management done in the right way can definitely reduce risk to the business. And by this, I'm talking about just the risk of a feature being launched that doesn't hit the mark, or a feature taking too long to be released, and so you miss an important deadline or milestone. I think it's important to make decisions based on research. And by having that research in place, you've got a much better chance of actually hitting the mark when it comes to delivering what you want to deliver. Now, obviously, I feel like this, I feel very strongly about this, and it's obvious from the fact that I started today's webinar with that statement. But by focusing on continuous discovery alongside development, the product team is constantly learning, constantly refining strategy, and constantly reducing the likelihood of things going wrong. Now, we will touch a little bit on iteration shortly, but by taking an iterative approach to product development, and maybe by prioritizing the weighted shortest jobs first is one way of looking at it, or the quick wins is another way, product managers can help to define product changes that bring value to the customer, to the business, for the smallest possible cost, with the opportunity of learning and improving over a number of iterations. So at this point, you might be sitting here thinking, well, that's good. I've got a product team. Everything's fine. I'm okay, am I? And it's not quite as straightforward as that. I don't think you just need a product team. What you need is a product team and a product culture. So what do I really mean by that? The very first thing that we feel very strongly about at ProdPad is that the product manager is responsible for what and why, and not how and when and who. It devalues the project management team actually and their skill set, who are clearly very valuable and clearly contribute massively to the success of new features. But it devalues that group of people by combining the work that they do with the work that the product management team does and the product management skills that are out there. So the combination of the two is actually very, very, very powerful, and it can enable quick decision making and the ability to pivot. But they're not the same thing. So really for us, the product manager is responsible for what and why, but they're not responsible for the actual delivery timelines. They're not responsible for release planning necessarily. They're certainly not responsible for resource planning and for budgets. And that's something that I think is a nice way to kind of just set a good product culture and make sure that product is something that's given a value in its own right alongside that project management skill set. Now, we talk a lot about what good looks like, and we hear an awful lot from our customers about what they think good looks like. And one of the things we hear a lot about is that Spotify model. Now, this is taken from the Spotify blog, the Engineering Culture blog, and something that seems to work well for Spotify, and is probably an example to many of us out here, is the ability to have teams that are well aligned but also have autonomy. So we're back to that word alignment. We're back to the fact that everybody in the team, everybody in the business understands what the business priorities are, but also has the autonomy to exercise their muscles and make the best of the skills that they have, and really deliver the best possible solutions without being dictated to about what the right thing is to do and what the wrong thing is to do. So I love this graphic because it certainly gives us all something to aspire to in the best way to deliver product changes to the market and the best likelihood of getting good business outcomes. So what we're really talking about here by having this kind of autonomous team is encouraging collaboration. I actually really love this quote from Jana Basto. Jana is our CEO, but she's also co-founder of Product Tank and Mind the Product. And one of her best lines that I seem to quote very often is that product managers don't have all the answers, but what they do is ask the best questions. So what does this mean in reality? What it means is that multiple stakeholders should and could have the opportunity to contribute to that decision-making process in a controlled way. When I say in a controlled way, I mean channeled maybe through the product manager, answering the questions that the product manager has, because at the end of the day, the product manager kind of is like your average 4-year-old. They're constantly asking why, they're constantly asking questions, and they're speaking to all the people around them to get those answers. So by considering the inputs of customers as well as internal stakeholders, a product manager can make a decision based on data rather than just based on gut feel. So once again, you're increasing the likelihood of success within the business. Now, how can you help that? How can you help to foster that environment of being collaborative and getting the right outcomes? I think as an executive team member, it's important for you to ask about outcomes and not output, and for you to ask about what the benefits are going to be to your customers rather than asking about what dates things are going to be delivered on. Ask about outcomes, ask about solving problems, and you know, I think the underlying thing here is that you might get a feature on time if you push for a particular date, but that's no good at all if it doesn't solve a problem. As soon as you insist on a roadmap which includes a timeline, you're telling your team that delivering on time is more important than solving users' problems, when really I think we're all probably aligned on the fact that solving those problems and having users and customers be happy with the service that they're getting and the product they're getting is more important than which date it arrives on. Yes, there are milestones and there are deadlines out there, and those should certainly be discussed and communicated. But when it comes to defining the strategy of what you're going to deliver, it's important to focus on the outcomes and not the output. I think when you start talking about things in terms of timelines, the big assumption with all of this is that nothing is going to change. I'll give you an example here. It's a slightly political example, and I'm not going to say which way I comment on this one. But regardless of which side of the debate you're on, the example of Brexit is a great example of how massive changes can happen around you that you're potentially not able to control, and that could massively affect your business. So if we cast our mind back 3 years, we would have just assumed that the UK would always be part of Europe, and clearly that's not the way that that's going right at the moment. So by planning ahead too far and putting dates on things, you are assuming that nothing is going to change. You're assuming that the status quo will remain, and that that nothing needs to change in your business. Whereas, as I've mentioned already, probably the only constant thing we have in our lives is constant change. So if you imagine this in terms of a timeline, it's easy to start putting current projects on a timeline. And actually that's something that we do encourage. If you're working on something right now, yes, create a release plan for that and have a Gantt chart to define exactly what's happening with a particular release. But that's not necessarily the same as a roadmap, which is defining strategy and direction. I think anything beyond the near future can only be mapped if you are basing it on assumptions. Things like how many resources are available, whether you'll have all the same people whether you've got all the same people in 6 months' time as you've got now, that they've got the same skill set as they've got at the moment, and actually that everything will work out the way you expect it to do and nothing will go wrong. Again, in reality, stuff doesn't work like that. Things don't go like that. And so having all of those assumptions in place is really setting you up to fail if you have a roadmap that's got a timeline on it. Now, a better approach is something like this, a lean roadmap. It communicates what will be done in the order that it's going to be done, and in rough time horizons: now, next, later, current, near-term, future. Just rough as opposed to that Gantt chart view. It allows you to see the strategy, it allows you to discuss the strategy with your product team, and potentially to identify changes which could need to be made based on market inputs. So for work that's planned in the near term, delivery teams should know enough to produce that accurate release plan and give you what you need in terms of sharing dates for things that are upcoming in the very near future. But having this other approach of showing now, next, and later also means that you can talk to your market about what you're planning to do in the future, and also to talk to your investors, to talk to your board about the direction that you're moving in, without necessarily having to make promises that you can't keep, because they are influenced by what's going on around you. So this style of roadmap is much better suited to communicating priorities, communicating direction, without tying you up in knots into something that is not actually achievable. Here's a slightly different version of it with a little bit more detail on. In this example, we can see what we're working on, but what's really important here is that we can see why we're doing it. Each one of these initiatives, the checkout flow, single sign-on, in-app notifications, and so on, are actually being tied back here to an objective or even an OKR. So we're saying that we think the inline checkout flow, if we improve that user experience, we're going to see an uptick in revenue. This is a hypothesis. This is a big bet we're making, that we're going to see more revenue if we focus our attention on the inline checkout flow. Now notice what I haven't got here is the exact features that are going to be in this inline checkout flow, because that's something we'll learn through iteration, that we'll learn through testing. But we are able to communicate direction, and we're able to communicate the outcomes that we expect, while still giving our team the autonomy to find out exactly the right way to deliver that inline checkout flow. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about supporting experimentation, and this ties in with that theme of iteration that I've talked about throughout today's webinar. I think experimentation can sound quite scary to a business, and I ummed and ahed about whether to use that term. But it is experimentation. It is working out what works and then changing according to what you learn. And it's about creating opportunities to iterate without building something perfect that maybe doesn't hit the mark by the time you actually get it out the door. So by experimenting, by continuously iterating, the product can progress by smaller, de-risked steps in a way that makes it easy to pivot when you need to pivot. Now, the cost of failure is lowered, and the business can develop actually at a faster rate, even though you are experimenting. I'm going to kind of give you a bit of an example. Imagine you planned to deliver a feature, and maybe you might plan it in 4 different steps. You plan to take step 1 and then check with the market, take step 2 and then check with the market again. You actually might find that you have solved the problem by step 2, or you might actually find that by the time you get to step 3, you change your decisions about what step 4 looks like because you've learned along the way. That is not something that you can do if you've got a timeline roadmap, or a release plan is obviously the best way to describe that, because those timelines don't consider the need to change your plans. Gotten a bit of an example here to put it into sort of a real life kind of way. Imagine we've got 2 of these little dots who want to communicate between point A and point B. What we're going to do here in step 1 is start out with the smallest, easiest test to see if we can solve the problem quickly. In this example, we've sent a paper aeroplane. It's a bit of a prototype. Did it solve the problem? Did the purple dot get what they really wanted from that paper aeroplane? What was missing? What was necessary to solve the problem? What can we learn from this? How can we make the next test better? In step 2, we've decided to test a bit of a voice tube, and it certainly looks to have made our purple dot a very happy little dot, and it looks like it solved the problem for the purple dot. But actually, maybe at that point, we've learned that some people like communication over further distances, where that tube is not going to be applicable for that use case. So that's where we start to think about developing the telephone. And maybe at that point, we learn that the video is the best way to go. Now, in reality, you're going to have some users and some customers who really do want the video functionality. And at the end of the day, it's going to take a while before they get that functionality. But as opposed to spend all of your time develop the video functionality and not help any of your users along the way, what we've done by using this method is we've actually started to provide value to the market along the way and given ourselves the ability to learn to make sure that when we got to step 4, what we actually delivered was the best possible solution. And in some cases, we've started to see revenue or seen improvements in our outcomes along the way, as opposed to having to wait for that big bang kind of release at the end of step 4. We've built, we've learned, we've iterated, we've improved, and we've de-risked. We've reduced the risk involved in the overall project by taking this experimental and iterative approach. So if we've decided that we're going to support our product team by allowing them to have autonomy, to making sure we've got alignment across the business, by taking an experimental and iterative approach to how we develop, and most importantly, by having them focus on outcomes rather than outputs like points and dates and things like that, what are we really going to get as a result of that? Well, first of all, we're going to get better decisions and better outcomes. It's a much more collaborative approach. Our customers are getting value quicker. We've got loyalty from our customers, and therefore we're likely to get more customers and customers who stay with us for longer. We're going to be much more data-driven in our approach. Our assumptions will be tested. Any problems that are going to rear their ugly head will be identified early. The cost of failure is low. And we are supporting learning along the way. So again, we're reducing risk. We're able to build the right thing. We're able to choose the right things from the backlog based on market intelligence rather than gut feel. We've got way more likelihood of building something that resonates with our users if we've done that discovery work well along the way. And we are evolving the product over the course of lots of iterations. So the cost involved in changing or pivoting along the way is much lower. You've less chance of having to backtrack over a big mistake because you've got much better chance of finding out about that mistake either before it happens or very early on in the process. And if change costs less, it's easier to try new things. We're more likely to be innovative in our approach. We're more likely to be able to take advantage of innovation around us as we implement new solutions. We're more likely to be able to be disruptive and to disrupt those marketplaces that we're trying to squeeze ourselves into. we've got better business alignment. Product team is sitting in the middle. It's speaking to various different stakeholders in different ways depending on how they need to be spoken to, whether it's high amounts of detail or summary information, whether it's technical language or whether it's business focused and customer focused language. The product manager can bring everybody together and communicate to them in a way that makes most sense for them to ensure we've got alignment across the business. And therefore, we're going to have increased effectiveness. Engineering understand what problems they need to solve. Sales and marketing understand who they're selling to, why they're selling to them, what it is that they're delivering and what benefits they're giving to their market. Customer services understand their customers. They find it easier to solve their problems and can give better advice. And services and operations teams can do exactly the same thing. Actually, it's simpler than all of that. I've rambled on a lot to you for the last half an hour or so about all of the things that product management can bring to your business. But really what it comes down to is what I said right at the very beginning. Collaborative product management minimizes risk. This is how we started the webinar. You can now perhaps see justification for this statement. Having a great product culture in place and a product team who are enabled to make the best decisions brings huge benefits to your business. And with a better handle on competing priorities and insight into the future, collaborative product management minimizes business risk. And rather than asking whether you need a product team, I suspect you're now thinking, well, why wouldn't I have a product team? And most importantly, why wouldn't I give my product team the best possible chances of success by giving them the best possible culture to give them the ability to make the decisions that they need to make? And with that, I'll pass this over to Andrea, who may have some questions for us.
All right. If you guys have any questions, please drop them into the Q&A tab. Looking at the poll, it seems 47% of the people joining us today are product managers, 17% are head of product, 6% are CEO, and we have a 31% of others. So I'm very curious about what that other is.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
If anybody wants to tell us either in the chat or the Q&A.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that as well. Yeah, so for the people who said other, can you pop that into the Q&A and just let us know what roles you've got?
Wondering what we missed.
We must have missed somebody. We've got a whole bunch of sales and marketing people on this call. That's what we've got.
We've got a junior product manager. Fair enough. It's still a product manager, but junior product manager. Thanks for that. We've got some questions. Oh, look at that. We have someone that is a continuous improvement product analyst.
Oh, that's fascinating.
That is really fascinating. And a digital manager. Thank you guys for answering. We do have a couple of questions that popped in. Fleur is marketing. Yes, we know Fleur. We didn't put product owners. Yes, that is so true. I forgot about product owners. Yeah. Platforms implementation support coordinator. I like that one. Hi, Fleur. Thank you for joining. If you do have any questions, though, about what Liz has talked about today, please do also pop them into the Q&A tab, which you should be seeing. I'm seeing both the chat and the Q&A kind of going a little bit crazy. So I'm keeping an eye on both. Oh, we have something that just popped up. How do you transition a department or organization from a project management culture to a product management culture? Do we need to establish things such as product management, COE within the organization? Let's start with that part first before
okay, that's a great question. It's something that comes up quite a lot. I think some of the advice that I've seen out there is to start small, and I think that's kind of good advice for any kind of change management, is start with something that is easy to approach, maybe something that's going really wrong in your organization as well, where people are at the end of their tether and thinking, how can we make this better? They're going to be more open to the idea of trying something new. I would heartily recommend watching a talk that is by Tom Loosemore, who that talk was recently published on the Mind the Product blog. Tom spoke at the MTP Engage conference up in Manchester a month or two ago, and he talked about how they have made changes to this kind of approach within the government digital services. I'm a big fan of these, actually. You know, when you this is in the UK, by the way, when you're applying for a driver's license or a new passport or whatever it might be, the digital services available to you there are actually really, really good. And part of it is because they've taken this approach to moving towards a product culture. Now, Tom has talked through in this talk all about how they approach that, how they got there, the steps that they took, and he gives some really great advice. His name is Tom Loosemore, so that's Loosemore, Tom Loosemore. He's on Twitter and stuff as well, and he speaks quite a lot about this approach. So I definitely would talk to him. Not talk to him, well, talk to me if you can, but definitely take a look at that video, because it's really useful.
Could you repeat his last name, please?
Yeah, it's Loosemore, as in Loosemore.
There we go. I was just posting it up on the chat.
That's it. It's a great talk. I warn you as well, have a sort of a Kleenex or a tissue or something handy, because he shows you a video at the end from a user who has massively benefited from the services that came out of this change. And it's very touching, and one of those moments where you realize why you are a product manager. Oh, there you go. Somebody's posted the link. Even better.
Thank you, Paul. Great. We have, I guess, from the same person, following up to that question is, what type of product management webinars would you recommend? I say keep on joining our webinars, because they're really great. Actually, our next webinar is by C. Todd Lombardo, you guys. If you know who he is, I feel like everybody knows who C. Todd is. But we are going to be talking about product ethics in our next webinar. So be sure to, I'm really excited about that one.
I'd also recommend, obviously we have a blog ourselves, but also I'd recommend Mind the Product, because that blog and they have a Slack community as well, which is joined by thousands of product managers, and the kind of topics that we're talking about today come up all the time, and everybody is very willing to give their time and thoughts to each other to kind of help the product management industry, if you like, just develop over time. So definitely look for Mind the Product, because that's a great one to be involved in. And Product Tank, go along to your local Product Tank and chat to the people around you who are doing that job. That's also great too.
Cool. Any other questions that you might want to ask myself or Liz? No? We seem to have a bit of a quiet audience today. Ooh, something just popped up in the Q&A. When your roadmap is theme-based and avoids using defined timelines, how do you handle timing-related questions from other teams who are dependent on functionality that your team is building?
I think I would almost turn it back onto them and say, you know, if I was to give you a date for it, but then it didn't solve the problem, how are you going to be able to deal with your customers? And how are your customers going to feel when you give something that's kind of subpar and not good enough? In my role, I am always keen to know dates myself for my customers, and I've learned now that actually it's much better to be able to look at the roadmap, look at what's coming out, and talk to my customers about what's happening, rather than giving them dates about what's coming on the roadmap. I think it's much more interesting and much more exciting to talk to customers about the problems that they are going to have solved in the near future, rather than give them a precise date about when that's going to happen. The other thing to consider is a lot of the time you're getting questions from your stakeholders about dates because they want to manage their own activities, but they don't necessarily have to manage those activities exactly to the day that the new feature is going to be released. They can certainly work in parallel to build up to a launch, for example, on the marketing side or the sales side, without knowing exactly the day that it's going to be released. And so I don't think really a date is something that they absolutely have to have in order to still be effective in delivering the right launch support for a new feature.
Cool. We have another couple of questions that just came in. The first one is an Agile related question. So what are your thoughts on differentiating product managers versus product owners as a role?
Do you know, I knew somebody was going to say that.
Yeah, me too.
So in the past, I have been a product director where I had a product owner working with me. We were lucky that we did have a really good relationship, and he did act more like a product manager than a product owner. I think every time you add in another person into that chain, from the outside market to the inside delivery teams, you run the risk of extra misunderstanding and extra rework. I think it's much better to have somebody who is a product manager who takes the role of product owner in a Scrum team rather than separate the roles out. Now, that might mean that instead of having an externally facing product manager and an internally facing product owner, you split the work between two product managers focusing on two different business processes or different functions or different modules, whatever it might be. But really, I think it's much better to have one person who is the linchpin between delivery team and the outside market, rather than just try and split that up between different, somebody who's more strategic and somebody who's more tactical.
Thank you for your question. Seems we have a last one here. How can we help change the expectation so that PMs can spend more time asking the questions rather than working on the execution details?
Well, for a start, I would share this webinar. For us, a big reason that we decided we wanted to do this webinar was because product managers were asking us, how can I, as Tom Loosemore's title, how can I change the weather within my organization? But again, I would go back to finding something that's maybe not going very well, suggesting an alternative approach and taking this product-centered approach, proving with a small project that it's worthwhile doing. Therefore, you're already identifying a quick win, and that is a great way to start to introduce change within an organization. I've certainly heard of other companies who've changed from project to product approach, and that seems to be a successful way to do it. Start small, show progress, share that progress, sing it from the rafters, and then move on to the next and the next. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is something that can be done if you take the longer view with it.
Awesome. We did get another question, but I've just recommended that they jump on a one-on-one call with you or Emma. So we'll take that one offline. But if there are any other questions before we go.
Just to comment on that one, yeah, you're right. I think a more detailed conversation would be worth having. We do, as well as doing obviously demos of our software, we also do run roadmap clinics, whereby you don't need to be a ProdPad customer, you don't need to even necessarily share your roadmap with us, but we'll sit and talk through with you the kinds of challenges that you're experiencing in working in your product team or working with a product team, and make some recommendations based on our experience. There's a few of us within the business who have been product managers in the past and have that kind of experience to share. And Andrea's just very, very brilliantly put the link into the chat there. So if you,
I was actually going to share it anyway. So.
Oh, there you go. You're ahead of me. But yeah, this is something that we can talk about. We can help you with, and you may decide to go ahead and become a ProdPad customer, or you may not, but the service is there for you either way.
Fantastic. I think that's it for us today. Thank you, Liz, for talking us through that. And thank you everyone for joining. We will be sending out the recording by next week, usually Monday or Tuesday. So keep an eye out for it if you want to rewatch it or share it with the rest of your team. With that said, have a great rest of the week and a great weekend as well.
Thanks
everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye.